Welcome to Brave Inflexions. My name is Claudel Fonek, and today I have somebody really special, so I'm very excited. Currently the CEO of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, Freeman Nomvalo, also previous Accountant General of South Africa. At some point, you were also the CEO of the State Information Technology Agency. So I always have to think about that acronym. CETA. But I think one of the most lucid thinkers around leadership who I know, somebody I really respect, but I think probably the most important part of his CV is that he is a very, very good friend of mine. Freeman Nomvalo, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you for having me, Claudel, and you're very kind with your words, but I'm looking forward to the conversation too.
So Freeman is just I thought as an introduction, I would just set the scene a little bit for our conversation and just very quickly run through some of the challenges that we're seeing now that we're in the middle of this pandemic. I don't think that anybody has foreseen the scale of what we are dealing with now, and a lot of leaders are finding themselves that in a very difficult position. Suddenly everything has shifted. Significantly so, and some leaders seeing that the old leadership norms are now out of the window, and you can no longer provide a clear vision of the future. We've been talking about VUCA, that's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity for a number of years. But I don't think that we've ever lived in this scale of uncertainty. And with this scale of uncertainty, it's becoming much more difficult to provide a clear vision for the future. You can no longer provide the comfort of consistency and promises on it. So it's one of the things that leaders are taught, that you must make sure that you're consistent and that when you make a promise, you must honor the promise. But I refer to the maze that we need to navigate through, but the maze with moving walls in the times that we live in. So as everything keeps on changing, very difficult to make promises. You can no longer control everything directly. Right? So your people are working remotely, lots of things suddenly out of the leader's control, and you can no longer rely on old and trusted knowledge. In addition to that, you now have to deal with your own realities too as a leader, right? So there's increasing expectations and pressure, maintaining the balance of focus between survival and opportunities. Your leadership style is tested. So if you used to exercise your leadership in a certain context and you've become accustomed to a style that you've adopted, suddenly that is tested. Pre-existing conditions in relationships amplified by the crisis. Freeman, I think you would have seen that there's been lots of articles, and I think the first one I saw was coming out of China, where they say that now during the pandemic, there's been a significant spike in divorce, in the divorce rate. And I think it's happening in organizations as well, where existing conditions in the organization amplified. And of course, your own nimbleness as a leader tested at the same time as well. I think just adding to that is, focusing on the leader within the context of the organization, but your own reality at home may also have shifted. So as you're also working from home, and maybe even the difficult relationships that you've had at home are being amplified, and having to navigate through all of that can be very, very, very taxing. So given that context, Freeman, give us your sense around, and I know you talk about mobilizing yourself as a leader. How do leaders navigate through all of this?
Claudel, the complexity we're facing is unparalleled and unprecedented. But what we can bring to the fore to be able to navigate is ourselves as we are today. And therefore, it becomes important that we understand that which we're bringing in, and which is ourselves. And it's easy for people to say, no, I understand myself, I believe in this, I believe in that. But often you find that we are more complex than that as human beings. There's a lot of things that play into us as a system, our personality, our life experiences, the way we think, and the skills that we have, and the emotional makeup. You talk about having relationship challenges at home, and you bring all of that into the leadership endeavor. And therefore, it's important that you understand the role that you play in the issue that you're dealing with within the organization that you are in. And as a way of illustrating that we are complex individuals, no single person behaves the same way in front of his children, and behave the same way in front of the spouse, behave the same way in front of friends and colleagues, and so on. So we tend to bring different sides of ourselves to these different settings. And it's important that we understand that makeup that we have, because that is the instrument, that is the tool that we are bringing into the leadership endeavor.
So you're essentially talking about a significant amount of self-awareness, which becomes even more important when you're in a crisis. Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
Indeed. Self-awareness to the extent that also you actually have to think about when you relate to colleagues, you don't relate to all of your colleagues the same way. There are those you've got loyalty to, there are those you push back on. When you think about the community, you've got a similar thing. And these are all the things that you are bringing. These are all the tools you are bringing into this situation in order to deal with the endeavor. By the way, in order to navigate this properly, I just had a discussion earlier today with another company, and they were talking about a number of people that are losing their jobs and those types of very hard decisions that have to be made. Now, when you have to deal with an issue under the current environment to make the change, to make the progress that is needed, there are times when you're going to have to take decisions that perhaps are going to hurt or negate what your friend has told you in the past. And you've got to live with that reality that at this moment, what is needed is that I need to break away from that loyalty that I have to my friend, that loyalty that I have to my community, and do what the situation demands of me at that time. You're not going to be able to do that unless you are able to understand yourself better. And of course, there are times when some of these things are a makeup of the total that you need to achieve. So there's a number of things, a number of projects that you've got to do. And at any given point in time, in order to be effective, you've got to deal with one, not all of them at the same time. And again, it takes really, really a very self-aware person to be able to think and sift through those things and say, I'm going to start with this, and I'm going to follow with that, and follow with that. And in the process, if you're dealing with an organization that is big, you've got a number of people, and these projects have got people who are actually sponsors of these different projects. And therefore, when you start with one, the other group whose project is not in your purview at that moment might start being resistant and not even supporting that initiative. And therefore, you've got to be able to prioritize and even accept those things that other people can say about you behind your back. You have to accept them about yourself.
And that can be very difficult sometimes, right? It's the understanding that people are not always going to fully grasp why you're taking the steps that you're taking and why you've prioritized the way you have, because they come with different interests and they look through different lenses.
They look through different lenses, and you are asking them to suspend their aspirations. You are asking them to suspend their wishes. And as you're asking them to do that, there isn't much certainty about the end goal. It may be clearly defined, everybody might understand it, and everybody must contribute towards its attainment. But at that moment, the ones that are going to contribute the most are these people you're dealing with, and they are not going to accept that and take it lying down. So you've got to be able to understand that you will have to do that and go through that step in order to make sure that you create that sense of traction that's going to enable you to drive the project that you need to drive.
Yeah, so it's having to balance that can, of course, be very difficult. So you're talking about self-awareness, the understanding, you're talking about the understanding of self. But then still, in terms of how do you navigate yourself through all of this as well in the process?
One of the things you need to be conscious about, and later we can talk about how you do it. One of the things you've got to be conscious about is that as you grow, you do things, you become successful. And sometimes you have defined yourself in a particular way. I don't talk behind people's backs. I don't take nonsense from anybody. So you've got your general predispositions that are determined by your childhood experiences, perhaps, or some experiences in the earlier parts of your life. There's a cultural background issue. For instance, some people find it difficult to tell an elderly person that he's talking nonsense, or that, look, you've got to shut up now and we need to progress with this thing. Or sometimes gender biases. So you've got all of these things that are a makeup of how you respond to a situation. And over time, having been successful in the things that you've been doing, you then tend to have those things that, you don't even have to think. Something happens, you jump. It's like there's a button that gets pressed and then your reaction comes. So understanding all of those things about yourself, what are those things that are my triggers? What is it that is like stepping on my toes and then I respond? Because if you can understand all of those things, then there is a better way in which you can then think about how you're going to intervene in this situation in a way that enables you. If you are not conscious of those things, those around you are very, very aware. They have observed you, they have seen you. If they don't like the agenda that you're coming up with, they are likely to contain you very easily. If they want to take you off the rails, they are likely to understand that if you touch this button, he's going to be mad. And when he's mad, is the end of the game. So that self-awareness is about thinking through all of those things, thinking through all of those processes that you normally engage in, sometimes without even thinking. And most importantly, in the end, our success sometimes becomes a liability in the sense that you get promoted because you've been doing very well at your job. If you've gone up the ranks in an organization, then you get promoted, and now you're fulfilling a higher role. And when things go wrong, you normally the person that jumps up and get it done. In a crisis situation, you must remember that you need all of the resources that you have in order to be able to drive the change that you need. So if you're the person that jumps at it and get going, people are going to take a step back and let you do it. And then because of the complexity, because of the need to call upon different perspectives in order to be successful, you will find yourself isolated. You will find yourself in a space where you can't tap on those additional skills that you have, on that knowledge. And that knowledge is actually key in ensuring that you don't have any blind spots.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that, especially in a crisis, one has to be so careful. Two things. The one is, I refer to the live wire under the button. Those things that when they press the button, they touch the live wire and you react instead of responding, that it may be amplified when you in crisis mode, because your stress levels also go up, and the more stressed we are, the less likely we're able to think through consciously through our responses. But the other is also that your natural tendency to jump in and fix things may also work against you.
Yeah. And by the way, what tends to happen with that is that, we like affirmation. Mm-hmm. We like people telling us that we are great. And if you the person that craves for that dies to hear those words. When people want to shift things in your direction, they're going to make sure that they supply you with lots and lots of that. But they're supplying you with that is about ensuring that they keep in that corner.
Yeah.
And there'll be no progress.
Yeah, so when you should not just watch your own responses, but you also need to watch how other people are managing you.
Yes.
Yeah, and I suppose that is very difficult, Freeman, when you have so many things happening at the same time. You know, so like when we've gone into lockdown, having to deal with trying to get business running as usual, and then you've got your people having to work from home and making sure that they've got the resources, looking after everybody and checking that everybody is okay. So your attention span is then spread thin, which makes it makes it easier for people to take advantage of you.
You know, if you think about it as running a marathon, if you're the guy carrying the water, the marathon runner is not going to get to the destination unless you keep supplying that water. Now, in an organizational sense, the marathon runner are the employees, and they're going to keep raising their hand and showing you that they're needing that water. But they are actually making sure that keeping occupied, serving their expectations. And their expectations may not necessarily be the things that's going to take you to the end point, given the crisis you are facing. So, and you may actually have internalized that yourself, that look here, I'm the go-to man. I'm the person who makes things happen. And so that's one piece. The other piece is about how married are you to your own ways of doing things? For instance, you could be one person that is known to be orderly. I know where my things are at. I know what I do when I wake up in the morning, what is going to be next, what is going to be next, to a point where, and I know because sometimes I'm like that, there are things that I don't want to think about. And if for some reason my car key stays in a certain drawer, and I get to that drawer and the car key is not there because my son had taken it, it throws out the whole plot. Okay? So think about it. You've been successful, we've been doing this in a particular way, and then all of a sudden, circumstances change. You've got COVID, people are working far from home, they're not in front of you, you can't just scream and shout at them. You now have to make an arrangement, log a call, phone, and all of a sudden, because your bandwidth is limited, you then find it difficult to navigate and deal with all of these demands on yourself. But you then have to create a space in which chaos is your friend. Disorder is your friend. And yes, sometimes confusion. Yes, you need clarity. We were talking about clarity earlier, where I was. You need clarity, but sometimes confusion surfaces things that you would not have thought about. So you do need, and conflict isn't always a bad thing. You know my saying that if you want to make iced tea, you first have to boil the water.
Yeah.
You know, so that you can get it to drag nicely and so on. So you do need to think of ways in which you can increase the heat in the system so that there is sufficient energy. When there's a crisis, there's something about crisis and mobilizing energy and mobilizing people to focus on something. And therefore, you need to then be conscious, first be at ease dealing with those crisis situations, be at ease dealing with those confusing situations, be at ease seeing people in a conflict situation, because then these conflicts aren't just personality issues. They may well be actually about values, the things that people hold dear. And therefore, understanding all of that and being comfortable dealing with those situations without putting out the fire is absolutely important. Of course, I'm talking about exploiting conflict and all of those things. Conflict can be so bad that instead of it galvanizing energy, it's destroying energy. It's destructive type of conflict. Therefore, you need to be able to understand that and balance it as you navigate. And these are skills you can develop over time. It's not something that you come up with. So if you understand yourself better, you will then be able to understand where those gaps are and begin to experiment with the things that are going to help you navigate that.
So as you're talking, the analogy that's coming to mind is, in the middle of the storm, if you are able to mobilize yourself properly, taking into account your understanding yourself, understanding where the life wires are, and so forth, and if that would then help you to get to the eye of the storm.
Yeah.
And being in the eye of the storm would then put you in a position where you can look at things more clearly from the perspective of, okay, so we're in the middle of conflict. How do I utilize the positive energy from the conflict, and how do I counteract the negative energy that would come from the conflict? But so it feels to me from what you're saying, it's like the more you understand yourself and the better you're able to manage yourself. And one of the things that you've mentioned is to know which are the structures around you that keep you anchored, and to utilize those, and to and then that would shift you into a position where you're able to see more clearly how you can use the opportunities in the middle of the crisis, if I can put it like that.
Tie that, what you just said, tie that with understanding what role you are playing at any given point in time. It doesn't matter if the CEO or you occupy any different role. There may be circumstances where you need to manage the situation, you need to contain what's happening, you need to control. And there may be times when you need to mediate because there's a conflict. And at that point, controlling, mediating is lowering that heat that is in the system so that it's bearable, so that people can then breathe and do the things that they need to do. But at times, you may be an advocate. You may be the one that's agitating. One of the examples I always cite about the different times when I worked in the Treasury, that there was a time when we had a minister that did not worry about the detail of what is happening in another department, but worried about what that department has. You squeeze that budget and the resources are limited, and it triggers the thinking that says, okay, this is all I have. How do I apply it meaningfully? And then we had an era post-2008 where the resources were limited, but what we see now as the budget deficit that we face as a country, actually, you can track when that happened. Now, the focus had shifted from actually squeezing the purse that is available into saying, what are the rules that we need to play by in order not to waste? And the two approaches are, none of them is better than the other, but they deliver very different results depending on the audience you're dealing with. And in our situation, they did. One was more effective than the other. So understanding all of those things and the role that you play is absolutely important. Don't play the role of a parent that's always providing, but sometimes you need to play a role of a disciplinarian. So the different situations that you find yourself in will dictate what is it that you need to do in doing that. And now in that situation, what's important is to understand that as a CEO, as a manager, this is my formal authority, it's my job description, it's in the rules of the game that we've defined as an organization, but also there may be informal authority and it might not reside with you. It might reside elsewhere in the organization. And you might need to use that informal authority to then navigate these different and conflicting and competing priorities within the organization.
So it's to bring you back to what you said earlier on about the analogy that you used about the marathon runner. So making sure that you are not so occupied with bits and pieces all the time that you're not able to reflect because that does take a deliberate reflection. If I'm going to be a disruptor, so that we can have the right outcome, I've got to think very clearly about how I'm going to do that and be deliberate about it. You know, so whatever I'm going to use in a particular situation would be dependent on a plan. It's a strategy. It's not just I'm running around like a chicken without a head and serving others' needs without thinking about where I'm taking everything to.
Yeah. What helps then to be able to do that with clarity is, you know, there's this thing about hitting the ground running in certain instances and not wasting time and ensuring that you respond instantly. Sometimes you really simply don't have the answers. And therefore you need to take a step back and analyze what's happening. But because now we're dealing about how you understand yourself better so that you can deploy yourself better, is you actually need to watch yourself in action. So you are in action, but somehow intellectually in your mind, you create that distance between yourself, the actor in the arena, and the person sitting on the sideline watching that actor in the arena. Because it is through that you're gonna be able to understand the patterns that are forming around you, understand when you are actually putting too much in the system than you need to, and then you can make the adjustments and the corrections that are necessary to navigate successfully. I think if you can do all of those things, that would help you mobilize yourself better and create a platform that will enable you to deploy yourself. And then next on we can talk about that. But obviously, when you've understood yourself that well, you can then articulate what purpose are you about.
Yeah,
it's important that you do that as well.
Sure, and the very important point that you made, which I think is difficult for most people, is to be able to step back and watch yourself as an actor in the arena. Because I think as human beings, our natural tendency is to go into self-protection mode. So very difficult for us to be brutally honest with ourselves. Right, so if you take the step back and you watch the actor self, and the actor is not acting very well, it's hard to say, well, that's me, I need to change. But it's what is I think very important in what's come through in our conversation is it is very conscious and deliberate thinking around mobilizing yourself, and that takes a concerted effort. It takes deep thinking. It takes brutal honesty with self. It takes your ability to step back from yourself. And I suppose maybe also a little bit not taking yourself so seriously that you can't be honest with yourself, right? Because we all make mistakes. As you said earlier on, sometimes when you come into a situation, like now in the crisis, the reality is none of us in our lifetime have gone through anything like this. And to be able to say, I don't know, and then step back and find the answers, opposed to being a bull in a china shop and running on your own and thinking that you've mobilized yourself properly, and actually you're more destructive than being constructive. Freeman, this was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for making the time to have this chat with me. In this video, we've been talking about mobilizing yourself as a leader. I'm going to have a second conversation with Freeman about deploying yourself as a leader, which is a follow-on from this conversation. I do encourage you to go and watch that video as well. Thank you so much for watching this video, joining us in the conversation. I'd like to hear your comments, so put your comments in the feedback box so that I can hear what is going on out there in your thinking. Thank you very much once again for being with us, Freeman, and our audience. Thank you for coming to Brave Inflexions. There's lots of other material on the website, so go and browse. And I hope that each one of you would have taken at least one little gold nugget from today's conversation, and that it will help you to become a better leader. Because remember, always, as leaders, we've got a very important role to play in society. It's not just your organization is part of society and has a very important role to play. Thank you very much. My name is Claudel van Eck. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.